This video is going to cover the basics of ActionScript and button navigation within Adobe Flash. I'm going to use ActionScript 3.0, so when you create your new file, make sure you select ActionScript 3.0. Before I get started, I'm actually going to set up my workspace a bit. Make sure your workspace says Essentials, and I'm actually going to add an extra piece to this, so I'm going to go to Windows, Actions. This is the action frame. It is what all the code will be on. So I don't want it to just kind of be floating here. I'm going to actually pin it over here. And now it's really small. There's going to be a lot of code in here, long lines of text. So I'm going to pull this out a bit. I also want to make this fit a little better, so I'm going to do Fit in Window. So now I'm going to go ahead and start setting up my layers. I'm going to have essentially a few different frames with buttons on them, and the buttons are going to take you to different frames. Okay, some of the frames it'll stop on the frame, and some of the frames it'll play through the frame. So before I do that, I want to set up my layers where I'll call the first one, buttons, and I'll put all my buttons on that layer. I'll call my second one text, and I'll put all my text on that layer. The next one I'll call Actions. This is the layer that I'm going to store all of my code on. And then the last one I am going to call Labels. Okay? So let's start by just setting up the animation. So I want this to have a frame with two buttons, where each button will take you on a different path, where one button will take you to one set of frames and the other button will take you to another set. Okay? So I'm going to start by making my first frame. So let me lock down all these layers except for the one with text, because I'm just going to start with the text. Let's explore buttons. Okay? So that's going to be my first frame, and it's going to have two buttons. Okay. Then my second frame is going to say something different, so I'm going to select all these frames here and do Insert Blank Keyframe. By making it a blank keyframe, it removes all the stuff that was on the previous one. This one is going to say, we stopped here. Okay, let's do it again on frame 3. Insert blank keyframe. And now let's say hello. So what I want it to do is to stop on this frame, give you a button, stop on this frame, give you a button, and then start playing an animation. Okay. Now if I were to play this movie right now by pressing Control Enter, this is what this looks like. It's very quick, not very helpful. I want it to stop here, then kind of linger on this for a little bit, and then go to the next frame that I'm going to have animation on, or words on. So if you notice down here, it says that I'm on frame 3, that I'm running at 24 frames per second, and this right here is the elapsed time. It's telling me that my animation right now is 0.1 seconds long, and you can see it's very quick. It's looping over and over again here. So if I want this to last for about a second, I need it to be about 24 frames. So we're on frame 3, so let's go to about 27 and go ahead and insert frame. Not keyframe, just regular frame. The reason I want to insert a frame instead of a keyframe is because nothing's changing. It's just going to stay like this for a while. Okay? So now if I run it, Control Enter, notice the first two things are really quick, but hellos last for a little while. Okay? So then I want to do something else, so let's go ahead and do Insert Blank Keyframe. That removes everything else. And this time I will put the text that says okay, And let's make that be about 24 seconds too. So, well, I don't need it to be that, or not 24 frames, excuse me. Oh, I'll do it right about here. So insert frames. So now if we run this, it'll last for enough time for you to at least be able to read it. Okay? Then I want to add one more. So let's do an insert blank keyframe. Let's have this one say visit a website. And the last one will say, so we do insert blank keyframe. Now there are hotkeys for this insert blank keyframe. I'm just using the right click because it's easier to demonstrate what I'm doing in a video. Let's just make this one say why not. Okay, so I want it to stop here and give me a button where I have to pick a button to go to the next frame. Stop here, give me a button that makes me go to the next frame. Play this, stop here, and stop here. Okay? But right now, when we play it, it runs through everything without stopping. So I want it to stop on this first frame. So I'm going to lock this text. The way you make a frame stop there instead of playing through the entire animation is you have to add in ActionScript code. So I'm going to highlight the actions layer. I'm going to go over here to my actions and I'm going to put in stop. Okay, this is known as a method, so I'm putting in the method stop. It's the word stop, open, close parenthesis, and you have to make sure you put that semicolon at the end. Now if I run my movie, notice it just stops at the first frame and doesn't go anywhere. Well, that's not that great because I want it to go to the next frame. So I'm going to use a button to do that. Before I start talking about buttons, I want to talk about this little A that showed up on the timeline here. This little A means that there is ActionScript on this frame. So notice when I click on it, ActionScript shows up. When I click on the ones without A's, there's no ActionScript in it. Okay, this is really nice to help you to see where your code is. Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to put a button on this frame that will navigate me to the next frame. So Flash actually has a bunch of buttons that are already stored in them. So if you go to Window, Common Library, Buttons, you'll see that there's a whole list of them. My favorite ones are actually the classic button, Arcade. Those are really cute. But I'm going to use, let's see, that one, because why not? So I'm going to click on it, drag it and drop it. Notice it shows up in my library here. So what I want to do is first resize it. Right now it's kind of small for my needs, so I'm going to use the free transform tool and I'm going to make it a little bigger. If you want to uniformly scale, remember you hold on shift when you pull the edge. Okay. I also don't want it to say enter. I want it to say OK. So what I need to do is actually view this button's properties. So I'm going to double click on it and notice my layers changed. Also up here it did say scene, now it says bar blue. So this is the set of layers just for this button. Okay. So one nice thing about buttons is they have 3 different states. They have the up state, over state, and down state. The up state is what it will look like when it's just sitting there on the screen and you're not interacting with it anyway. Over is when you highlight, hover over it with your mouse. Down is when you click on it and hold it. And hit is actually not really a state. It will never really look like this. What this is the hit area, the area of the button that is selectable or clickable. Okay, so notice it's the same as the area of this button. Hit is usually going to be the same as your button. Hit is really helpful for if you have an invisible button. So for example, let's say I wanted to know when someone clicked on the left side of the screen, I can put like an invisible box here and it has no up state, nothing in the up state, but just has this like a black box in the hit area, and that'll allow me to see when they click on that side of the screen. Anyways, so we have our animation here. If I want to change this text to say OK, I need to go to the text layer and notice it automatically highlights that, and just change it to say OK. Right? Now I want to get out of this button and go back to my scene, so I click on scene up there and I'm good. Okay. Notice now you can't highlight the text anymore. So what I'm going to do now is make this button navigate to the next one, because if you run the movie now by pressing Control Enter, nothing happens if you click on it except for the animation changes. Okay. Buttons are really nice in Flash because you don't have to do any coding to change the animation. It automatically does it, and the buttons that are preloaded into Flash are really nice because they already have all the animations drawn out for you. Okay. So now what I want to do is add some code that makes this button go to the next frame. And I'm going to do that by using a code snippet. A code snippet is pre-written code provided to you by Flash. So if I want to use a code snippet, the first thing I need to do is give this button a instance name. So I click on the button and go to Properties. Notice the very first thing here is instance name. So I want to give this button a name. Let's just call it OK. And then underscore BTN. Whenever you name a button, it's good practice to always end the button's name in BTN. That way when you're browsing through your code, it's obvious that that variable name or instance name references this button. Okay, so I've given it a name. And now I am going to click on Code Snippet. You can also find the code snippet here. I'm going to do Timeline Navigation, click to go to frame and stop. And notice it adds all this extra stuff into my actions frame below the stop that I used before. Before I go on explaining what this code means, I want to first point out this. These are instructions provided to you about what this code snippet actually does. Notice that it starts with a slash and an asterisk and ends with an asterisk and a slash. This is how you block off a large wall of text so that it can be used as a comment. Comments are just texts that are put into the code that aren't read. They're just, things that don't actually affect the code in any way. They're just notes to yourself, really. The way you do a block is by putting this and this at the beginning and end. Notice if I delete that, it changes color. Now it's reading it as if it's code. Another way you can do it is by doing 2 slashes and then just typing what you want. So, okay. I'm going to go ahead and delete this because it's a lot. The only real code is this right here. The first line is known as an event listener, and then this is a function. Okay, so the event listener, notice the name of my button is here, and then it says add event listener, mouse event click. So what an event listener does is it essentially looks for an action to happen. Usually the action is something done by the user. Okay, so OK button, it's saying look at the button and see when it is clicked. This is the event it's looking for, mouse event clicked. And then it has this thing right here. This is a function. So it's saying if the mouse button is clicked, go to this function, and here's the function right here. Now this function, notice it has an open brace and then a closed brace. Okay, and then it says go to and stop 5. This is saying go to the 5th frame and stop. Well, I didn't want the 5th frame, I wanted the 2nd frame, so I'm going to change this to the number 2. Okay, so now my button should take me to the 2nd frame, so if I do Control Enter, woohoo! Okay, it works. Now, there's another way that we can do this. Instead of using the number 2 represents the 2nd frame, I can also use labels on my frame. Okay, so if I want to label this frame, I'm going to use this label section, or this label layer that I named here, and I want to give it a name. Okay, so if I click on Properties, I'm going to call it We Stopped. So I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to go back to my ActionScript on frame 1. Notice now there's a little flag on the frame 2. That means it has a label. So I'm going to go to my ActionScript, and instead of the number 2, I'm going to do a quote that we stopped, end quote. So now notice if I run it, it does the same thing. The benefit of using a label instead of a number is if I were to add in extra frames, this frame might not be on frame 2 by the time I'm done. It might end up over here if I start adding things or moving it around. But by leaving it with a name or a label, that means even if I add an extra few frames in the front, it'll still always take me to this frame here. Okay? Oops. Let's go back to my actions. So I want to have a button that goes to the second page, and then I want to have another button that'll take me to this little animation here. So I stop here, then go and play. So to get to this frame, I used go to and stop. But if I want to go to the next frame and play the animation instead of stop, I'm going to use go to and play. So let's put another button on this frame here. You can, let's do a new one. Actually, let's go ahead and make a button. I'll show you how to make a button. So I'm going to just draw a box or whatever. And if you click on it, then do right click, do convert to symbol. Make sure the type says button, and let's call it blue button. Okay. So now this button is just some button that I made. Notice there's a little blue button here in the library now. And I'm going to make this one really simple. Let's double click on it to go into it. And I don't even have to do over, down, and hit. It just won't be animated at all. Let's go ahead and make it say play some text. And I should probably change the color of that. Oh, no, it's white. Let's make it a little bigger. Now you can get fancy with these buttons. I'm just going to be pretty simple with this one. I'll show you some more fancy button work in a minute. Okay, so this is just a button. There's no animation on it. You just click here and then it'll go to the next frame. So let's go ahead and add the ActionScript for it. So before I do that, I need to give it an instant name. So let's call it the play text button. BTN. Okay, go ahead and copy that. So I'm going to click on that. Well, I don't need to copy that because I'm going to use the code snippet. So I don't have any ActionScript on this frame. Okay. I don't really need the stop code here, but I do like to put it just to be safe. But I do want to use my code snippet for this. This time I'm going to use go to frame and play. So double click that. Notice it put in my instance name. I'll delete this. And it gave me a new function here. Okay. So this time I am going to, actually, I need to change this one to 2. Okay. This time I am going to make it go to frame 3. Yeah, frame 3. Actually, I didn't need to change this, sorry. We can leave this as F1. I was changing it. I was thinking that we needed to have a different function name, but we don't. You can leave it as what it is here. Go to and play 3. So now it's going to go to frame 3 and play the animation instead of stop. If I had it as go to and stop, which is what our other code did, it would do this. Let's explore buttons, play some text, and it would just stop on the word hello and it would never go anywhere. but I want it to stop on to play through the word hello. So I am going to change this back to play. Okay, so now let's explore buttons. Okay, we stopped here. Play some text. Woo! But notice it loops all the way through because I don't have any stops on these here. So I want to hit the button, go through this animation, go through here, and then I want it to stop here. So I need to do stop. Now if we run it, click the button, now it stops. Okay? So before we do that, let's do some more buttons. Okay? So I told you that I wanted to have two buttons on this frame here. One that took me through the animation, and then another one that just took me another direction. So I'm going to go ahead and make another button. Let's use a different color. I know this thing is super tacky, but I'm just trying to show you how to do this. Okay, so I draw a little rectangle, I click on it, I do right click, convert to symbol, and then I can call this green button, whatever you want to call it, it doesn't really matter. Okay, so now notice I have green button in my library. Okay, so I'm going to double click on this to get into the button section. I actually want to do a little bit of an animation with this one. Instead of it saying, so let's just call this text. Oops, spell it right. So let's go ahead and put, let's see. No! Let's change that color. To white. Okay, so I want to do a little animation when you hover over it. So I'm going to do another frame here. Insert blank keyframe. Oh, sorry, let's do, let's do insert frame. Okay, so it'll look like this all the time, but I want there to be a blank keyframe right here. So that the only thing is that's going to change is what it is on this layer. And I'm going to do pop out text. Okay, so this way when you hover over it, it will pop something out. So let's make it say why. Okay. So now when you hover over it, it's going to say why. I mean, it's kind of silly, but you can even make like a rollout here. You can even do some animations and stuff with this. Okay, so let's run it. That button doesn't do anything except it says why when you hover over it. Okay, so now let's go ahead and start adding in the actions for it. So let's go back to the scene. So remember, I want it to go to a different frame. Now that's what this one in the back does. Okay, so this is frame, what is it, 62? So let's go ahead and give it a label, and we can just call it opt out. You can call it whatever you want. I'm just giving it a name. Okay, so let's go back to our previous button, give it an instance name of no button, or BTN, excuse me. Okay, click on this, go to code snippet, and I'm going to do go to frame and stop. Okay, let's delete this. Now remember earlier when I accidentally thought I needed to change these numbers, it actually does go ahead and give you new numbers for the new functions, which is really cool. The main reason I didn't need to change it before was because this one is go to and stop. The one before was a go to and play, so I didn't need to change it. So these function names are different. Notice this one ends in a 4. It's skipped 1 and 2 because I've done a few retakes on this video. Anyways, so I want it to go to, what was the label on that again? Opt out, copy and paste. So go back to my first frame. actions, where you at? There you are. Quote, opt out. Okay. Now, I don't need to save it just yet. Well, let's go ahead and save. Probably should have saved to something more useful. But anyways, okay. So now if I run it, it will go to this, but we didn't put a stop on that last frame, so it's going to go to it. Oh, did I put a stop on that last frame? Oh, I said go to and stop. Excuse me. Sorry. We used the go to and stop, so it will go ahead and stop on that last frame. I like to put the stops in there just to make myself feel better. It's not really necessary in this case, but I like to put it in there. So we did use a stop, so when we do no, it does go to that last frame. Okay? So I have the two buttons. One goes this direction, and one goes that direction. Okay? Let's add a little bit more just to do some more interesting stuff. So notice I have this visit a website. I want to show you how to make a button go to a website outside of your Flash movie. Let's make this button from an image. So I'm going to do File, Import to Library, and I'm just going to pick this logo here. It shows up in my library. I'm going to drag it and drop it, and it's huge, so I'm going to rescale it. Oopsie. Let's scale it there. Shameless plug. Yes, I know. Okay. So first thing I need to do is convert this to a button. So I right click, convert to symbol, make sure it says button. Let's just call it AG. Okay. So then I'm going to do code snippet. So I already have some code on here, and it's just the stop. But if I click on this, do code snippet, I am going to use actions, click to go to web page. So double click that. Oh, I forgot to put an instant name on this, excuse me. If I had just said OK there, it would have automatically given me one, but I like to make my own instance names. So I'm going to take this to my YouTube website, so YouTube button. I can name it whatever I want, really. Okay, so go to that. Click to go to website, and there you go. It already added in all the information. I'll delete that. If you want, you can read it when you do it yourself. But here I'm going to change this to youtube.com/agodbold math. Okay, so let's run it, see if I did it right. Okay, play some text. Voila! So it's really easy to make a button out of pretty much anything. You can use the buttons that are preloaded. You can make it out of an image. You can make your own buttons. Okay. Now the last thing I want to do is, when I run these things, it just kind of stops here or stops here, and there's no way to really loop back. So you should add kind of a loop button. So I am going to make one more button, and I'll use it actually twice. So let's go to replay. Oops. Let's change the color to green. I know, this is so tacky. Okay. So convert this to a symbol, and we'll call this the replay button. Or replay symbol, whatever. And I'm also not being very good with my naming conventions, but that's okay. So I'm going to double click into it, add some text that is white and says replay. Okay. Scene 1. So this one doesn't have any animation or anything to it. If you did want to add animation to it, what I like to do is go to the over and then insert a keyframe here. Oh, actually, add another layer. I like to do it like this, where I insert a keyframe in the bottom. Okay, and then I just kind of do another rectangle underneath it, a little darker. So when you highlight over it, it just kind of looks different. Anyways, so now we have our button. Let's go back to our scene. So I want to make this go back to the first frame. Now, right now it's first frame. I can leave it frame 1, or I can call it like home or whatever. I'm just going to leave it frame 1. So I'm going to click on this, do a property. So let's call this replay 1 btn. Okay. Click on that and do a code snippet. Go to and stop and change it to the number 1 for the first frame. Delete all this. You can leave it in there if you want. Okay. So now that one should take me back. No, replay. Okay. And now let's go to the frame here, visit a website, and let's put 1 in there too. Now I have this replay symbol. I'm going to use it again. Okay. So this time I need to label this instance. Notice that it shows up twice. It has 2 instances, one on this frame, one on this frame. This one I called replay 1. This one I might as well call replay 2 or replay 0, whatever you want to call it. Replay 2 btn. Okay. So I'm going to add some code to this. Go to frame and make it go to frame 1. So now if I click no, it goes here. I can go back. I can say okay, place some text, blah blah blah. I can go to the website, or I can replay. So I will cover a few more things in future videos of like animating buttons and things like that, but for now I think that's all I want to cover with buttons on this video. Thank you.